Hello, welcome back to Algebra. In this lesson, we're continuing to work with the quadratic formula, one of the most famous equations in all of algebra. So we're going to be using it to solve lots and lots of different quadratic equations, using, of course, what we talked about a minute ago, the quadratic formula. So all of these problems use the quadratic formula in the same way. It's just the complexity can increase sometimes, for instance, you might have fractions involving your quadratic, or you might have imaginary numbers running around, or you might have square roots or other more complicated factors running around. But ultimately, in all of these cases, we're going to use the quadratic formula the same way. So I'm just going to give you practice working a variety of different kinds of problems so that you can have confidence in using this very, very, very important equation in algebra. So for instance, if we have the quadratic equation 5x squared plus 3x minus 2. We're going to say that that's equal to 0. How do we solve that? Okay, well, the first thing you have to do is you have to identify what is A, what is B, and what is C. The first thing you want to do is always put everything to one side of the equal sign, and whatever is in front of the x squared, that's what we call A. Whatever is in front of the x term, that's what we call B. And whatever is the constant, that's what we call C. Now notice there's a minus sign here, so the C term is actually a negative 2. The B term is positive 3, and the A term is a 5. Positive 5. And I always recommend that we write the quadratic formula every single problem we do. Negative b plus or minus, and the way I do it here is b squared minus 4 times a times c. Once I have that written down, then I put the square root around it so I don't mess that up. And then on the bottom, it's 2 times a. And so at this point, all you have to do is identify again what a and b and c are and just put them into the correct location. So for x, we're going to have its negative b, but b is 3. So you say negative 3 plus or minus, then we have to do b squared, but again, it's 3, so that's 3 squared minus 4 times a, but a is 5, times c, but c is negative 2. Don't screw that up and forget the negative. You have to have the correct signs for everything. This square root lives around this entire calculation here, that lives under the radical. On the bottom, 2 times a, but a is 5, so 2 times 5. Now notice, I know that you guys know what 2 times 5 is, so I could have written 10 down here. Inside of here, I know that you know what 3 squared is. It's 9, right? So I know that you guys could do some of these calculations as you go along, but it's much, much better to actually write the quadratic formula down, then put everything into it. Don't do any calculations yet, and then in the next step, do the calculations. Because if you start doing too many things too fast, you will eventually make a very simple mistake, and we don't want to do that. So we have here negative 3 plus or minus. And on the inside here, we're going to have this big radical that's going to live here. It's going to be 9. 3 times 3 is 9. And then we have a minus sign, but it's multiplied by another minus. So what's going to happen is these two minuses are going to make a plus. And then 4 times 5 is 20. And 20 times 2 is 40. So it should be 40. Positive 40, because negative times negative is positive. Notice that square root that I wrote is entirely too long now, so we can truncate it there. And on the bottom, we have a 10. Now over here, we can continue the calculation. We'll say negative 3 plus or minus the square root of, what do we have here, 49. Now that's nice because we have a square root of 49, which we know is going to be a nice number. And we're going to have a 10 here. So again, we can say we have negative 3 plus or minus, what is the square root of 49? It's just 7. And then we have a 10. Now technically, I could leave it here like this. This could be the answer because negative 3 plus or minus 7 and then divide the answer by 10, that's the right answer. It is the correct answer. But since it's just numbers and no radicals, we do want to calculate the different solutions as much as we can, as fully as we can. So solution number 1 is going to be negative 3 plus the 7 over 10 from the plus sign here. And then we'll have another solution, which would be negative 3 minus 7 over the 10. So those are going to be the two solutions there. And what we're going to have here is, what is negative 3 plus 7? It's going to be positive 4 tenths. And if you divide both of these by 2, 4 divided by 2 is 2. 10 divided by 2 is 5. So you get 2/5 right there. So we think that is one of the answers. And then over here, negative 3 minus 7 is going to be, well, you could just write it right here, negative 10 over 10. And when you divide those out, you get negative 1. And that's the other solution. So let me check myself. Negative 1 and positive 2/5. So you see, sometimes you can get whole numbers or negative positive integers, and sometimes you can get fractions. Sometimes when you solve the quadratic formulas, you'll get radicals. Sometimes you'll get imaginary numbers. Sometimes you'll get complex numbers, which means real plus an imaginary part. You cannot predict ahead of time from your quadratic what you're going to get. Notice we have just whole numbers here, integers, negative or positive. When we get down to the end, we get a fraction, and we get a